In this section, we're going to chat about a topic related to SQL or NoSQL. And that's really the question. When do you want to use SQL and when is NoSQL apt for your application? What services do we have in AWS to support them? So we'll start with our discussion with relational databases first, which is RDS, and then flip sides to DynamoDB. Our discussion is going to describe what RDS and DynamoDB are. We're also going to talk about SQL or NoSQL. Where does RDS and DynamoDB fit in and what their use cases are? So let's go ahead and jump in to this discussion and understand this better. So there are two basic categories of databases. They are called as relational, and what we often hear them as SQL or SQL databases. And there is something else called as non-relational databases. And you will hear this as NoSQL or NoSQL. RDS for SQL databases and DynamoDB for NoSQL databases is what we're going to refer in this lesson. So the objective is to understand the differences between these two. It's really important to understand that relational databases stands for SQL databases, and we're going to take a look at different kinds of relational databases that we have in AWS. So the relational database or RDS is an SQL database service that provides a wide range of SQL database options to select from, and that includes Amazon Aurora. Well, let's go ahead and do that in the Amazon console. So I'm going to type in RDS in the search box and then click on create database, right? You will see that there are several kinds of engines that you can create in RDS, starting with Amazon Aurora. Now, Amazon Aurora is AWS proprietary RDS database service, but it is based on MySQL. However, AWS Aurora is created and branded and marketed by Amazon Web Services. So you got other kinds of database as well. So you got MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle, and the traditional Microsoft-based SQL as well. So there are several options to choose from. So depending on what's your application behavior and what your application prefers, you may pick and choose one of these. So with all of these options that we have, the RDS makes it easier for you to set up, operate, and scale relational databases in the cloud. So the important point is scalability of relational database. Also remember that these databases, regardless of RDS or NoSQL, they're called as platform as a service or PaaS. So when you go ahead and create a relational database like Amazon Aurora in AWS, then that means that AWS will support the underlying infrastructure. So all the admin tasks such as provisioning the hardware, setting up the database, patching, security, high availability, and backups, everything is taken care by AWS. So just for this reason, you can focus your attention on applications and just connect with the relational database. I'll go ahead and click on next. Now that I've selected Amazon Aurora, I'll choose that and click on next to just walk you through the creation of a Amazon Aurora database. Now the first option is the capacity type. You got multiple options here. I'll leave it as provisioned. But one thing I want you to notice is the serverless type as well. So serverless means that you do not have to worry about the underlying instances or picking what sizes you need, right? So it is automatically scalable and it will be working with those container based SQL resources. Okay, for now I'll go ahead and click on provisioned and leave that. I'll leave the default DB engine version as 5.6, but it's always worth looking at the options you have, right? So there are several versions, 5.6. So depending on the application, right, you may want to pick and choose one of them. So let's say your application is compatible with 1.22.2. So you will go ahead and select that. All right, so I'll leave it there. The next option is DB instance class that defines how much power do you want to give to this Amazon Aurora instance, right? So this is a combination of your CPU and memory. When you're doing the labs, it's always a good practice to select T2.small because you do not need anything bigger than that for your lab purposes. But if your application demands more CPU and more memory, go ahead and scroll down and select the appropriate one. The next option is the multi-AZ deployment. Do I want to create read replicas in a different zone? Do you want multi-AZ deployment? If you want that, then you will go ahead and select create replica in a different zone as well. but at this point it's a lab setup, so I'll just leave it to no and keep moving forward. This is the place where you will type in the DB instance name or the DB instance identifier. So I'll just type in, let's say, university database, and the master username. Do not type in something that's frequently used like admin or administrator. I'm not saying that it's not going to accept it, but as part of the security practices, do not use regular usernames. And the next option is to give it a complex password. I'm going to quickly punch that in and then click on next. All right. The next options are more about network, security, and high availability. Let's walk through that. VPC. So when you create your database, you might be interested to host it in a particular VPC. This option is all about that. Now we created a test VPC, so I will select that one and a subnet group as well. I do not have a subnet group, so I will let it create a new subnet group during its creation. The next option is whether you want your database to be publicly available. You would never do that in production environments. In any case, you will not have your database exposed to external world on a public IP address. That's against the security rules. So it's always preferred to set it as no, and that's the default option as well. Okay. The next option is about availability zone. If you would like to host it in a particular availability zone, if there are any preference, feel free to select them from the drop down menu. I'll just leave it as no preference and keep moving. We know what security groups are. In one of the previous lessons, we did define and understood the differences between security groups and NACLs, right? The security groups are more of a firewall that is attached to your instance hosting your SQL, right? So the ports must be opened up so that you can allow inbound and outbound connections from that security group, okay? I will let it create a new security group as well and fill up the DB cluster identifier name. This is a university database, so I'll call it as student information something, and then type in the database name as well. So I'll call it as year one or something. I'll leave the rest of the options default here because I do not need to understand them right now, only because it's just a cloud essentials and cloud practitioner. We really do not need to understand them. So you will go through these options when you will be undergoing a solutions architect or more advanced classes. That's when we'll go more about encryption, failover, backup, backtrack, etc. But at this point, I'll just click on create database. It will take a couple of minutes to create a database instance for us, but while it's doing that, in parallel, let's go ahead and look at a few of the options we have and understand this better. But keep in mind that SQL and also NoSQL from AWS is a platform as a service. What does it mean? It just means that you do not have to manage the hardware. AWS handles all the administrative tasks associated with that hardware, including patching that hardware, patching that operating system on it, the security related settings, the availability, and any other backups are all taken care by Amazon. You simply have to specify those options like we did in the previous screen in the wizard. You just got to select them and Amazon will take care of rest of the things. You just have to focus on your application. But there may be scenarios where you need full control. There may be a compliance regulation that you're following, or maybe you're working for a government where you are not allowed to hand over the database responsibilities to the cloud provider, Amazon in this case. What do you do then? Well, in case you need to have full control over everything, that means you want to take care of its security. You want to back it up. You want to do the patching, etc. So you need full control over deploying the database. Then you might want to install your own database on that EC2 instance yourself, okay? By doing so, you will have full control over everything, the operating system, the upgrades, the scaling, backing up, security, all of those things then become your responsibility if you deploy your database on an EC2 instance. All right, so that was about relational databases. Let's go ahead and take a look at DynamoDB.